Welcome. With me today is a very good long-term friend of mine who's here to help me kick off episode 1, Mr. Gareth Bryant of Scendar, formerly Interactive Accounting. So Gareth, thanks so much for joining me. Our relationship's been standing longer than 20 years. We met in university where we argued with our lecturer on management accounting about some tax rulings. We ended up getting kicked out of the tutorial, and I feel like it was a lifelong bond from then on in. We crossed paths, stayed friends, but we crossed paths again many years later on my third attempt to get you to join Interactive, which I kicked off at the end of 2010. It's awesome to have you here. We've known each other a long time, and thank you so much for joining me then. And it's my absolute privilege to have you jump on and be our first guest now. Welcome, mate.
Cool. Hi, I'm Gareth. I'm the CEO of Scendar. So Scendar is a full-service chartered accounting firm based here in Sydney. We're a team of 32 staff. We've been around since 2012, and what we specialize in is working with early-stage high-growth companies from all services, from bookkeeping, accounting, tax, specializing in fractional CFO services to help them with their investor reporting, forecasting, and the like.
And I know you know about a few of the questions I'm going to ask. You also don't know about some other ones. So I'm excited to see how this all goes. So tell me about your accounting journey. From the pre-read, you got your first payslip before the age of 21 in accounting. So how did you get your first job? Where was it, and what were you doing there?
So my first job, I was 20 years old, so just under 21. Seems like a lifetime ago now. And it was at my parents' accountant's office. So my parents are not accountants, but they would go once a year to get their tax done in a small suburban firm out in Western Sydney. And they, I had done, I'd started of all things, a media degree at university, and it wasn't going great. The pragmatist in me said, there are Gareth, when you get to the end of this degree, there are very few jobs and they don't pay very well. And so, fast forward a little bit of time, I switched to accounting, started doing quite well, got to the end of my first semester. As you know, in Australia, end of first semester is tax time. And so mum and dad went into the accounting firm, I went along with them, and long story short, I got hired. I sat in this tiny little office in this, building in Penrith. And to the point where they called it the cupboard under the stairs, with a Harry Potter reference. And so, I started there, personal tax returns, smashing out a whole heap. And so that's where we began.
Okay. And so when we met in university, I'm not sure this is the same firm. I think you'd changed by then. But you were I want to say superannuation, for those of you overseas, 401k, self-pension management entity, accounting guru. What drew you to that kind of work, and how did you end up specializing in sort of retirement vehicle accounting and tax?
Yeah, so a lot of junior accountants, I kind of jumped. I was with 3 different firms within like the first 3 years of my career. If I'm being really honest, mainly due to trying to get a pay rise, because young people have to pay the bills after all, right? All respect to all the bosses I've ever worked for have been fabulous, and have done me a real service in my career. So when we met in the second year of our university degrees, so this was kind of near on 20 years ago, showing our age, is that the firm I ended up with, and it was the firm that I was with up until I joined into what was Interactive Accounting then, and we at that point were dealing with a lot of high net wealth individuals, we had an office in the CBD, we had an office in Gladesville, and there was a lot of really wealthy people, and for a firm of our size, we looked after a lot of self-managed super, a lot of private investment trusts and things like that. And so just through sheer math, the sheer math of it, that there's this much work to get through, is that I would have spent a lot of my year either planning, executing the work, helping the team, do that work. And so it was never a kind of clear intent that I love doing this. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life, evidenced by what I did after it. But you can't do that stuff for, 6, 9, 10 months of the year without becoming some level of a specialist.
Well, the one thing that I
Absolutely.
appreciate about the retirement accounting and tax piece is that everything needs substantiation, documentation, and like in and out needs to be accounted for to a T. So there's not really any gray areas aside from should I buy this investment or not, or should I sell it now? And like in theory, if it's run properly. So I do appreciate that. It probably makes me one of the worst self-managed super fund clients you can have. But it's
as
don't
my
be laughing,
old
Gareth.
boss would have, yeah, as my old boss would have said, materiality is 0. There is no such thing as materiality when it comes to the accounting side of that and the tax side. It's not, you don't have the audit exception where you can kind of say if it's under a couple of percent, you can let it go. It doesn't work like that. So yeah, agreed.
Correct. One of the pre-questions we asked was, when did you first use cloud software? So I'm gonna tie all this in together. So you went from a desktop-based firm, and correct me if I'm wrong here, to a cloud-based firm. You probably went from PC to Mac. You went from super funds to SMBs, and you went from working with probably a more mature, shall we say, group of people to particularly having 2 peers that were the same age as you roughly. How did that feel? Like, that's a lot of change all at once.
It was a lot of change. I think I've always been the type of person that's open and willing to change and not really stuck in my ways. But yeah, you're right. We went from an office that ran APS, and a lot of the clients who weren't super funds or investment trusts would use MYOB. So they would mail in or drop off their CD, right? The disc.
Flashbacks.
We used to have floppy disks. I'm not quite that old. We did have the CDs, right? And then we kind of leveraged off, and later on we moved towards kind of, flash drives, right? Which was kind of very advanced at the time. Using a desktop, not using a laptop. PC based, Windows based, all those things, right? And then, so how was it? Like, I felt for the first 6 months that I worked at Interactive, that I was running in like second gear. Like, I felt so slow. Like, it wasn't through lack of effort or application or intelligence. Well, I don't think it was because of intelligence. Maybe it was. Don't know. Like, I felt like I was at 40 or 50%.
It wasn't lack of intelligence. And we just, having been there, it wasn't that part.
Oh, you're too kind. It was just very much that. And in the years that followed, not to skip ahead in the story too far, but I would always use that as a words of comfort to our new starters, right? In that when I started, I felt exactly like this, in that it's all not familiar. You have to, kind of acclimatize to the way we do things. But once you get going, right, you will be really efficient, right? You will get a lot done in a really fast amount of time. You will be able to leverage the tech, all those sorts of things. So yeah, so to answer the original question, it was a lot, but also having good people around you to help that transition makes a hell of a difference.
So question, so you're at this firm, you're doing pretty well. Why join Interactive and put yourself through all of these changes, move to cloud software, perhaps moving to a more risky environment, as I remember some of our conversations from back in the day? Like, why?
Like, I don't often consider myself like on trend at all with anything, but I think it was fairly obvious to me where things were heading, right? From a tech perspective. And, a lot of practitioners out there will attest to this, like changing how you operate for a client base that has a lot of history, a lot of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it type attitude to how they do things from an accounting perspective, that equals a lot of pain. And so I think seeing where it was going, seeing that, the firm I was at, as great as they were, and as, I have many great memories from working with them, is that they weren't heading in this direction. They were never going to be an early adopter of tech. I remember having conversations with their practice manager, who's still a friend of mine, 5 years later, and they're like, we're just getting started on Xero, right? And we're just starting to adopt cloud. And so not wanting to be left behind, was a major part of it, but also seeing that there was, a bit more variety was possible, and the chance to have something, even though it had already started and you'd already started it, but something that I could kind of call my own from an early stage, as opposed to maybe becoming a partner at a firm that had been really well run and operated for 30 years.
I'm smart enough to know I don't know everything. I'm a very good generalist, I think, and I'm good at a number of things. I'm not brilliant at anything, which is why and I'm pretty sure after my last pitch to get you to join Interactive was the third time, not the first. Big, borrowed and steal with Lisa as well. And there was a common theme around hiring in people, and this is how we got started, hiring in people who were frustrated at the fact there wasn't really a clear path for them at their existing firm. Not that they didn't like it, not that they weren't good at their job, and providing a home for them. And so we think about like the next key hire that we made post yourself. Like I'm pretty sure that person had the same kind of background and same kind of piece, or am I misremembering?
I think there were two. It was funny. I was actually thinking about this like before we jumped on this chat, right? It was very much around like those pivotal hires in the early days, and it was like who helped set us on a path to success, right? And I think there were really two, and there's the one which is the layout, which is we brought in an intermediate accountant kind of 6 months into my time there, and funnily enough, I had hired her as a graduate at my previous firm and convinced her that it was a good idea to come and work in a team full of men,
Hi, Charlotte.
boys. And she did, and fortunately I'd learned barely enough to be a half decent manager by that stage, and managed her quite well. We got along well. We had a lot of shared interests, despite the fact that she was 7 years kind of my junior. And then I hopped across, and then kind of kept in touch, and then a few months later kind of heard on the grapevine, and by talking to her directly, that she wasn't particularly happy with the replacement manager and wasn't loving life there. And like when I was a junior accountant, the temptation to go and see if the grass is greener on the other side, and I managed to convince her to come across. For people who may not know our story, Charlotte is now one of our directors and shareholders, and a good personal friend of mine. That is obviously the number one hire, but I think that's an easy answer, right? I think the other answer is that we were all really good at client stuff, right? We were really good at managing clients. We were really good at getting the work done. We were really good at getting results and being output driven. But what we really sucked at was being organized and having things run efficiently and effectively. And we were fortunate to have a client back in those days, of all things, a tailor company, right? Who kind of custom made clothes. I'm still not sure how they became a client, given what we've moved on to do.
But I can tell you, but that's okay.
That's the story for another day. And they had an operations person there who was an absolute gun, and we did the thing, and we poached her. We brought her in for an interview. It's still to this day is the weirdest interview I've ever sat in on. I think the analogy we used was we need an air traffic controller, and we were literally sitting there waving the paddles like as if we were which is not actually an air traffic controller. It's actually the person on the runway, right? Like directing planes around. And so Emily, who now works for Ignition, joined us. And I think that at that point we were growing fairly rapidly, right? We were kind of, I don't remember the exact numbers, but we would have been doubling revenue year on year at that point, and bringing on a lot of new clients, doing a lot of new work, and I think bringing her in kind of probably saved our bacon a bit, and made sure that our systems and our processes were top notch for kind of a growth company ourselves.
Couldn't agree more. Emma and Charlotte are pivotal to the success of the firm. They're awesome people, and obviously happy to both be working with them kind of still today, which is epic. It's almost, a decade later. So since 2012, so you made the switch from, I would say, compliance to advisory.
Yep.
Now, obviously, having been sitting beside you alongside some of this piece, like I remember, some of the early conversations we had, you, me, and Lisa, trying to convince you that you could do the advisory piece in addition to just doing the tax piece, right? And so it's a super helpful topic for a whole bunch of practitioners thinking that this is more of a global audience, right? So it's like, if you are in the US right now, you're sitting in, I'm trying to remember which teams you support, mate, but let's go Chicago. Is it the Bears or am I wrong? Yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
no, you nailed it.
Perfect. So you're in Chicago, and it's like someone's just done tax returns for the last 5-6 years of their career. What got you over the hurdle on the confidence piece, and then what do you think the skills piece or experience piece was you needed to move into advisory successful? Because you're now chief advisor for all the big clients still at Scendar.
Yeah. So I think like it's funny. I read a lot of whether it's marketing material from various companies or just industry pieces about making the switch. And I think about my journey, and I think I'm the perfect example of this, in that I've always been like a people person, right? Like I can always have a conversation. Always happy to kind of put myself out there. Not to the, like, I wouldn't call myself like a full extrovert, but client relationships, getting on the phone, having an honest conversation with somebody and kind of telling them what they need to hear, not what they want to hear, kind of came fairly naturally. But it was really, I'd only ever feel confident in talking about the things I was absolutely sure of, right? And this is not an advertisement to go and advise on things you don't know about. Please don't take it like that. That would be terrible advice. But I think there's a lot of practitioners out there who I've dealt with, who clients have dealt with, who I see, at Xerocons and other places, who are super capable of this stuff, right? You have those conversations already with your clients, and it's just a matter of going, how do you take it from the ad hoc to the structured, I'm going to package this up and I'm going to charge money for it, right? Because I think sometimes people go, well, I know this, but doesn't everybody know this? Like, this is common sense. And a lot of the stuff that we have in our I guess, tool belt, I don't know what the right analogy is. The stuff that we use every day to help our clients is stuff that can be actively, I guess, shared on a regular basis. And I think I was fortunate. I came into a structure where we'd already built like packages, right? We just kind of, they'd gone live, and I could kind of, fit into a framework. So it was a good transition, right? So it's like not going, okay, Gareth, you need to step out of being a tax person and just being, getting the work done and working really well with the team, and going, I can go, okay, this client is on this package. This is how it works. This is what they need each month. This is what they need each quarter, depending on their price point. And we just go and deliver it. And I think what you need to, and what people expect is that they need to know everything like on day one, right? I still think back to the level of knowledge around for things other than the accounting stuff, right? So clients don't want to hear about, business owners do not want to hear about how you need to post a journal for that, or how you need to reconcile that, and how the P&L looks one way or the other. They care about the things that impact their lives, right? And so take yourself out of the accounting bit and think, and talk about the things that you still know a lot about, but talk about it in a way that can actually make an impact on them. And you might go, oh, that seems so simple. But you telling a carpenter or a plumber that, their margins, here's what your margin is. This is why you're struggling to pay the bills, because you're not charging enough. And here is the breakdown of that. And like, we've done that in our own business when we actually sit down and analyze our own. But like, giving people that information, every accountant knows how to do that. Well, I'd like to think every accountant knows how to do that. You just got to then communicate it, right? And so I'm rambling a little bit, but I think, you get better at it over time, but you got to start somewhere, right? You've got to start somewhere. And, it doesn't need to be this revolutionary, I'm now an advisor, I'm no longer an accountant. Like, there is so much that can be done and, around what you already do, and just making sure that, number one, you can present it in a way that's going to benefit the client. And number two, like, you should be charging for it because it's incredibly valuable, right?
Couldn't agree more. And I'd say the highest level of like advisory is when your company gets big enough that it has a board, and you sit on a whole bunch of boards. So for someone who's aspiring to do so, or even just industry peers, what do you think? What advice would you give to them about preparing for a board meeting as a fractional CFO? Your role, and what would you tell your clients about how to prepare for a board meeting if they're going to their first one with, in most of your cases, it's with investors, right?
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. So let's start with my role in the board meetings I attend. So I sit in. I'm typically what you'd call an observer, /presenter. I guess they don't call it presenter, but I'm not just sitting there watching. But what my role is as the outsourced fractional CFO is that what we want our clients to feel comfortable with is that we can give confidence, assurance, and certainty to the other people who may not be in, especially the ones who are not in the business day to day, who would sit on these boards. So whether that's a partner of a venture capital firm, a high net worth individual, another successful founder / operator of a technology business in some examples, who will sit as an independent board member, and giving them good information, because directors have duties and obligations and they need to be across them. So that's usually my role. And so number one tip is to make sure that your part of the pre-read that gets sent out, so a board pack, is prepared in good time, right? So I think there are a lot of people who sit on boards of small private companies, so whether it's startups, scale-ups, small business, etc., who have many different roles, whether it's other boards or day-to-day work or whatever, right? Family, etc. And so they need time to be able to read and digest the information. At the same time, just because you're only the CFO and taking care of finance, you should be making sure that you're reading the whole pack yourself, right? And getting context around the business, because sitting in there and saying, here's our performance for the last 3 months, here is what our forecast looks like for the next 3 months, here are the areas of concern, here are the areas of opportunity. A lot of that, there's only so much you can discern from a set of financials and a forecast, right? You need to have color around the whole business. So that's another kind of key thing that I learned pretty early on, is like, read everything, be across everything. You're unlikely to need to speak about any of that, but it adds some color to what you're working through. And I think so that's kind of for people who want to do this. I kind of fell into it, if I'm being really honest. Like, I fell into this and realized, fairly early on, once I started to do it, that it was incredibly valuable for our clients. They know that they need to know their numbers. It's an important thing if you're a CEO or a COO or anything of your own business. You need to know the numbers. You can't just cop out and say, the accountant handles that or the CFO handles that. Like, that's not a good way to run a business. But there's one thing to know it, and there's another thing to be able to present it and give people confidence, right? And so I'd like to think I'm reasonably good at that these days, through doing, right? Not through just being a gun, but actually just practice makes perfect almost. So that's that. And then just for the client themselves, it kind of mirrors what I just said, right? Is that respect people's time, give them information that is really like going to tell the story of where things are at, good, bad, or ugly. Don't just present good news, present everything, because there's a governance element of boards, right? Where you're doing a service to the people who've invested in your company, to the people who help you run your company to do it. But there's also an element where the people that you put on those boards should be there to help you. And I sometimes need to remind some of my clients that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay for you to tell them that things aren't going well. right? And be, they should be supportive. They also should hold you accountable. If you say as a CEO you're going to do stuff, you need to do it. But lean on them for support and be as brutally honest as you can. And if you're worried to do that, then maybe you don't have the right people on your board.
Well, pretty confronting stuff there. Do you enjoy sitting on boards?
I really enjoy it. I had one yesterday, and it was a really eclectic group, right, from various backgrounds. And it's a 2-hour meeting usually, and I kind of talk for 10 minutes, and and that's great. Like, it's good. But the amount of knowledge that you learn, and that you can then, there's takeaways that you can always share, like nothing confidential, of course, just to be super clear. But learnings from people who are sales experts or go-to-market experts or product and engineering experts, things that, I sit in on calls now and I talk to people about, well, if you're struggling to get that customer over the line, are you ISO certified? Like 5 or 10 years ago, I wouldn't have even known what that meant, right? Like, it's now just because you pick up things and go, well, you might be able to sign that enterprise client if you have this already, and sometimes people know that and sometimes people don't. But that's just one example, right, of kind of things that have nothing to do with accounting, but it's just a point that you pick up from something else, that you don't offer it as an expert, but you offer it as a thought, right? And it's something for them to then go and explore. So yeah, in short, yes, I love it. It's probably one of the best parts of my job.
Yeah, definitely good learnings. It is one of the most enjoyable pieces, even though it's a lot of hard work to get it
it's
done.
Incredibly stressful. It's for founders and for CEOs. It's incredibly stressful leading up to it. But I don't think I've met like a founder who afterwards doesn't, I liken it as an unfit person is to going to the gym, right? It's like you kind of dread it, you don't want to go, but then afterwards you're glad you did it because you learned something and you're better for it, right? And so that old adage, like, just lean into it and it'll be good for you.
Yeah, one piece of advice is if you're in the finance arm of this, or your fractional CFO, lock the numbers that are connected to the deck if you're using Google Slides. We've definitely had a few interesting meetings where what we sent out in a PDF didn't match what was on the slides, purely because someone was doing kind of a what if inside the master spreadsheet, which perfectly fine, just maybe not at the time of the board meeting.
Yeah, the last thing you want to do is shake confidence. You want to give confidence, not undermine it.
What's the best role you've ever hired? So not necessarily person, but like role. You referenced Charlotte and M before, so that would be, I'd say M's more of an operations manager / practice manager, and Charlotte was an intermediate at Unlock Capacity, but is now your general manager. So would you say and hoping I got that title right, but would you say the GM is the role that is the most important, like the best role that
I think so. So I think for our business, it wasn't an actual hire, right? But it was a redefining of somebody's role. So I think that was a real kind of linchpin. We were quite a few years in at this stage, and the natural path inside our business was that somebody would come in, they would be an accountant, they would get good, they would get experience, they would be able to master everything that we do, they would be able to communicate with clients, and they would eventually move through to being like an advisor level person, right? And that was kind of the trodden path, and that we assumed that everyone wanted to aspire to that. And as great as Charlotte is with people, she never really enjoyed that part of the business, right? She never really enjoyed being juggling the 100 balls with different 10 or 20 different clients, but we always kind of went, oh, she'll get, and this was with her in conversation, but you'll get there. And then at some stage we realized actually we should focus more on people's skills rather than the assumption that they would move on the same path as everybody else, because the reality is you should, if you have the opportunity to do it and you've got the right people, is you build a role and you have to focus on what people are really good at. We spend years telling our clients that they should give us their finances because they should spend their time on doing the things they're really good at and not doing accounting and bookkeeping and tax and financial reporting. And so we listened to our own advice and we carved out a role and made Charlotte what was then a general manager role, which is now more or less a COO role, to use a more, kind of formal term. And I think that really, again, changed the game in a similar way in the early stages of bringing on an operations person to begin with. Is, so many accounting firms focus on the doing of the work and the client relationships and all that, which is incredibly important. But for a team to be successful, they need good boundaries and processes and organization that, and you need to give that some priority. And so we kind of flipped her role because she's amazing with our team. Everybody loves her, even when she's telling them that they haven't done the right thing and that they need to pick up their game. Our clients still like it, and it's a double kind of whammy for us in that she's a really good accountant. And so not only can sometimes when you bring in ops people, they're wonderful at ops, but they have to learn the context of being in an accounting firm unless they've worked in one previously. We didn't need to do that. We already had one who was a gun like senior level accountant, but then also really good at the people and operations side. So yeah, we flipped that role and we haven't looked back.
What's the hardest thing about being the CEO of an accounting firm? Bookkeeping, accounting, and tax firm, I guess.
The battle between working on the business and working for your clients, right? Because you grow up and you start your career and it's all about client work, and it's all about client work. It's about productivity. It's about charge out rates. It's about, it's about utilization and all those sorts of things, right? And you're taught you need to be 85% productive. You need to be doing that. And then you get to being a manager and it flips, right? You have to manage people. You have budgets to meet. You have all these kinds of things. And then you go one step further and you start running your own shop, right? And you need to allocate time to, how are we going to grow this business? How are we going to be successful? But also, we have really high touch relationships with our clients. And so, there's Slack messages, there's emails, there's phone calls, there's deliverables that we need to deliver on, and making sure that I delegate that as much as I can to my team and then be there to support them versus doing the work myself it's the never ending challenge.
Yeah, I think we struggle because particularly in this profession, as you come up, you're always like, do whatever you can. Like the client's always right, do what you can to please them. But handing off that relationship once you've built it is always pretty bloody hard. What's your favorite bit of software? You did answer this in the pre-read, so let's see if you get this right. So
we use a tool. We use a tool called Visible. Funnily enough, you introduced this to me through your work, what you do at Ignition.
Shout out to Mike.
Big shout out to Mike. Love Mike. He's a legend. Mike is the CEO of Visible, based in the US. So we were looking for a tool. So we've used all manner of reporting tools, and they all serve a really great purpose. Have had a great relationship with the team at Spotlight, at Fathom, etc. over the years. But we were looking for something, given the client base we work with, we were looking for something that's a bit different. And so giving them reports that look like, startup friendly reports where we can not only present the formal financials, so the P&L, the balance sheet, the cash flow statement, etc., but actually really focus in on like metrics and present them in a way that's like pretty pliable and flexible. We came across Visible through seeing some reporting from both, Ignition and a couple of other companies, and the ability to intersperse charts with text, with all kinds of things, and it really, and our clients love it. Like they love it. They love getting those reports, and they're like, this is so much better than what you delivered before, right? And it's not actually any like more like detailed information. It's just presented in a different way. So yeah, our CFO clients would be lost without it. You don't have to name their names. Maybe you can describe their business. But do you have a favorite client, and why? Like picking your like favorite child, right? Which you're not supposed to do. That's the next question. Oh, right. I can't ask that question. So I think I would probably go more general. I don't think I have one particular one, but I think the type of client that I love working with is the ones that don't have it easy. Not like, clarify that. Nobody has it easy. Like, starting a business is incredibly difficult, incredibly stressful. But I think the most rewarding time for me is the ones who go through like really difficult periods. So whether it's difficult to raise money, sales, or, sales slow down, customer, getting customers on board and growing becomes really difficult for whatever reason, whether it's finding product market fit or macro kind of economic, slow down, like recession and things like that, who kind of go through the trenches, and you go through it with them. And often, as the money guy or as the finance person, you can bear the brunt of it sometimes, even though it's completely out of your hands. But very much, the clients who have gone through that and then come out the other side through sheer hard work, persistence, and taking on board not just what I say, because like I just do one particular part, but listening to the people around them and getting good advice and making good decisions. I've got a few of those type of companies that I'm being fortunate to have been with for at least 4 or 5 years. And that's like thinking about where they've come from and where they are now, and all that is incredibly rewarding to say that you've been on the journey. So yeah, I think that would be, they would be my favorite clients. And if that by chance they would ever listen to this, they would know exactly who they are.
I got a fun question to finish up, still work related. What is your most favorite accounting industry? I'm going to say so I think gathering, party, whatever that you've been to, like all time. And it's not meant to be a seek for a plug for us in any particular way. I'm just thinking about all the ones we went to together.
All the ones we went to. Wow. Probably a couple, actually. I went to, back in 2019, pre-COVID, we decided to go on a bit of I wouldn't call it a jaunt, but we wanted to see how it was done elsewhere outside of Australia. And so we went to QuickBooks Connect in San Jose. And yeah, like, I think, everything is done in a much bigger, bolder, brasher style in the US. I love spending time in the US, and getting to hear people. Sorry?
I know. Like Gareth's annual trip.
Yeah, getting to hear, Ashton Kutcher talk about startups sitting like, 30 meters away, or not even that far. A whole bunch of just a completely different approach to an accounting conference was pretty good. But I think like the ones that we enjoy the most are the events that happen around the events. And I promise this is not a plug for the pre-con drinks. But usually those smaller, more intimate events that happen around the conferences are always like, you get to see the people that you've spent time with in the past that go through the same battles that you go through, and getting to catch up with them. So I think, yeah, probably I prefer those more, mainly because I think I prefer the social element more than the content. But yeah, there's probably the two ones I'd go with.
Thank you for sharing. I'm going to switch over to personal a bit. It's going to be a bit more rapid fire. So cool. Let's keep it short, sharp, and sweet, right? So I know you're a raving sports fan. I don't need to look at your Twitter to figure that part out. Obviously, I know you quite well. I mean, I've got a question for you straight off the bat. Over your right shoulder, there is I'm pretty sure it's a baseball diamond. What's that, and what's the team?
No, it's not. It's actually a football thing. So it was a present that my wife got me. So I'm a big Leeds United supporter, as painful as that is sometimes. And when they got promoted 3 years ago, my wife bought this as a present. So it's not only got a picture of the team down the bottom. I'd move the camera, but it's going to go weird. But also a piece of the net from the game where they got promoted cut off, and it's actually inside it. So yeah, big sports fan, but yeah, sadly a big Leeds United fan as well.
Okay, so greatest football or soccer player of all time?
Of all time, I think everyone has to go with Messi, right? Like, I don't think there's any contest at this point.
Okay. I'm not sure when this is going live, but the semi-finals were just played for the Women's World Cup. So who's going to win the Women's World Cup, and who's winning the Men's World Cup, the next one?
So I think well, obviously having gone and watched England in person last night, as sad as it was to see them beat our Matildas, but I think England will
Take it
take it
home.
out. Yeah, they were red
Okay.
hot last night.
Okay.
Men's
And then
World Cup.
who's the men's? Yeah.
It's still 3 years away, so you're not sure which of the greats are going to be there. But I think we'll go with a wild card, and then we'll check in on this in 3 years' time. But I think the Netherlands. I think the Netherlands. I
Okay.
think they're finally due. They've got a really good solid base. So yeah, let's go with that.
I know you're a big NBA fan. Who's your team?
So we're very much a big Boston Celtics household.
Complete the sentence. NFL is
A really complicated sport, but enjoyable.
complete this one. Baseball is
A lot more fun now they've got a pitch clock, so you can get a game said and done in 2.5 hours. But
like
again,
2020.
very enjoyable. Very enjoyable.
Favorite quote of all time? Do you have one?
I think it would be this is a cliche one, but it kind of rings true, is that you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take, right? Not the Michael Scott version, the Wayne Gretzky version, the original one.
If you were gifted $1 million tax-free, answer this question. I would
use it. I would use it to do good. We are, both personally and professionally, we do quite a bit of philanthropic work. I think I don't need, if someone was good enough to give me $1 million tax-free, is it, at least for a good portion, maybe I'd have to take my wife on a holiday so she didn't get completely angry at me, but otherwise we'd probably pay it forward and find a way to make a lot more than $1 million worth of benefit out of $1 million, and pay it forward.
All right. So closing. I told you I wanted to be a bit more like Hot Wings, where I researched this and kind of give you the opportunity. So I don't have multiple cameras pointed on you, and for that I apologize. But now's the time to shine. Tell us about what's going on in Scendar in your life, and what do you want to share?
So I think look, we very much have found our niche, right? We look after a lot of SaaS businesses, which is why we're here today. Early stage startup and growth companies, and I think we it's taken a while to really hone in on our niche and where we are. But I think the way that we've managed to find out our home, if you will, and be able to really develop good relationships and so I think, like, for us, it's really about solidifying that and making sure that we are providing really valuable service to our clients. We're looking to ever expand, like, the breadth of service that we do, so we can add more value to them.
Are you asking for more clients at this point, or what's the shout out?
I think we still want to grow. We're still ambitious. We definitely want to grow, but grow sustainably. We want to make sure that as we grow, is that the level of service that our clients receive stays high and consistent. It's always a challenge in professional services. So yeah, we're definitely not satisfied with where we are. We still think there's a lot of ground out there that accountants aren't necessarily covering at this point in time that would be really valuable to clients. And so we're trying to, work on ways where we can, expand our expertise and be able to pass it on to our clients.
So I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to say a huge thank you to you, Gareth, for jumping on. I'm going to give a shout out to Kylie, Abby, and Harper, the Bryant family. Thank you so much for putting up with me over the years, and letting your dad and your hubs come to work with me and ultimately, steer what was Interactive, now Scendar, into the future. It's been an honor to work with you, mate, and I'm very, very proud to have you on the episode 0, as we figured out we were going to call it. Couldn't call it the inaugural one. I just want to say a big thank you.
The feeling is very much mutual. Yeah.
Looking forward to some of the outtakes, and hopefully we're still mates in 20 years' time, and you haven't decided to ghost me by then.
No, we'll be able to have a good giggle about my terrible predictions in about in that time as well. No, thanks for having me. Yeah, look, the feeling is mutual. Thanks for putting up with me. I'm not always the the easiest person to deal with. You know, I like to think I'm a lovely person, and deep down I am, but it takes it takes a special individual to spend that amount of time with anyone else. So all good, man. Pleasure. And thanks for having me.